Welcome back to another edition of You and Who's Our May. I'm your host, Randy May. Today, we're talking about the 1987 Air Academy football team. When we last had a show last week, we talked about the end of the Barnett era, the beginning of the Mike Roof era, and how between 80 and 81 in the 84 team, there was a down, kind of a slow couple of years, 3-7, 4-6, and then the team that I was on, the Phoenix Rising team, according to the Gazelle, we went 8-2, undefeated in Colorado Springs. Played pretty well in Pueblo a couple of times with losses against South. We lost half of our starters for the first two quarters of that game because of the SATs, and then we lost to Centennial in kind of a close game that could have gone either way. We could have beaten them at home, I'm pretty sure, but they got us in Dutch Clark Stadium. And so what I started to see when I was going over all these years and trying to recreate my top 10 and all that and trying to figure out, with your feedback, what teams, what years were what, I started to see a trend where every 3 years there would be a championship team and then 2 down years and then another championship team. And it happened it wasn't always exactly 3 years, but from 76 to 78 to 80. So it was like every other year. And then it went from 80-81, because 81 was strong against Mitchell and almost pulled it off. It went from 81 to 84 to 87. And each one of those teams, 81, 84, 87, league champions. And so here's my theory. So my theory is the freshmen and the sophomores in 81 during the 1981 year are more impressionable than anybody else, and start thinking about going into high school and competing as JV players, in some cases young varsity players, and start thinking about building towards their senior season, probably subconsciously, not literally like, boy, it's gonna be that senior season that we actually start winning, and it's gonna be because of me. But that's how it worked out. And so for almost 20 years, you had that reload at Air Academy that you didn't see at Mitchell, that you didn't see at Cherry Creek, and a lot of the other perennial schools that just had, almost always, they were 7-3, 9-1, maybe every once in a while 6-4, but then 10-0, state champions, 13-0. And that's just how it worked out at Air Academy. And I think it was because during the Barnett era, the younger kids, the way that the Rock Rimmon kids and the Air Force Academy and the Black Forest kids became impressionable at the K-Dome over just the spirit and the pride of the program. Those kids ended up working hard for 3 years and won a league championship. So, 84, we won the league title, lost to Skyline in overtime. I was on that team. 85, 1-9, beat Sierra. 86, I think they were 3-7. I could be wrong. But then 87, Mike Roof has some pretty good seniors and some unknown sophomores and juniors, at least kind of unknown. T.D. Paxton ended up being the quarterback and ended up being ready. I mean, truly ready to go. Had Alex Kleckner and a couple other receivers that their names escape me right now, but I have them written on a historical roster that I'm going to show you here in a second. If my voice starts to go, That's probably going to happen because I've already tried this recording once tonight. Didn't go very well. So what was impressive about the 87 Air Academy Kadet football team is the defense. And here on your screen, you can see the scores in the, what was this, the Will Rogers League, I think? It wasn't the Pikes Peak League yet, I don't think, but I think it was the newly formed Will Rogers League. Woodland Park, Lewis Palmer. I don't know if they were part of it yet, but definitely Rampart, Palmer, Sierra, Harrison, Cheyenne, and Liberty. I think they were in that newly formed league. I think there were 2 divisions. But anyway, it doesn't matter because we ended up beating Woodland Park 25-8. Somehow lost to Lewis Palmer, who had built a pretty good program. I think that Todd Morse was at Lewis Palmer by then, and he was a JV coach at our academy. He might have been at Lewis Palmer by then. He was one of my favorite teachers and coaches, Todd Morse. So somehow we lose to Lewis Palmer. Probably didn't have our offense clicking yet. Then Fort Morgan, who Dom Lapino ended up at Fort Morgan just a couple years later and took them all the way to the state championship game, and they barely lost or something. And so the Fort Morgan team I don't think was bad, and Air Academy wins 45-0. Then we beat Rampart 17-3, Palmer 16-0, and we lose to Arapahoe 21-7. So that's the last time they lose all season. But you'll see after 6 games, 39 points given up. So that's a touchdown. Then they beat Sierra 21-13, Harrison 22 zip, and Shine Mountain 27-7. Then they blank Liberty 49-0. So 10 games, 8 wins, 2 losses, and they only gave up 59 points. That's less than a touchdown and a blocked field goal or extra point the whole season. And so that's a defense. That's like the 76 Steelers defense right there. Then they go into the first round of the playoffs and they beat Douglas County 6-0. So now it's 11 games and 59 points given up. Then they beat Loveland, a game that I was at. They beat them 14-10. I watched a goal line stand at the end. Will McCombs and Tasha Williams both had sacks in the last 7 seconds of the game to beat Loveland. And I was standing in the end zone because that's where the exit was. It's like a track and a chain link fence, and that was impressive. Then they go to Pueblo Centennial at Dutch Clark Stadium, and they lose by some kind of extra point issue problem. I think it was an extra point problem, 14-13, and so easily could have ended up in the state championship game that season. And that is why they are higher in my top 10 than they were 2 years ago when I first made a top 10. It's hard to believe 2 years ago is when we first started talking about all this. So I'll go over to my top 10, which is right here. This is originally, I started to revise this on June 23rd. You'll see that I revised it again on the 4th of July, which is today. And here is how I rank them now. You can see the list. I'll start at the bottom. The 81 team easily could be anywhere in the top, in the 4 through 10, 5 through 10. The 81 team at the end of that season was as good as anybody in the state because they almost beat Mitchell in the state semis, and Mitchell won the title. And they went into overtime. So that counts for something, even though they lost 3 times that season. 74, the original Barnett team that I don't know a lot about. 2007, Mike Hillstrom takes over for Kevin Sherman. that's a whole nother show that would be conjecture and rumor and innuendo about why Kevin Sherman was no longer coaching at our academy. I don't know what's true and what's not, but it was, the way I understand it, very controversial why Kevin Sherman had to leave our academy and ended up at Cheyenne Mountain. But anyway, Mike Hillstrom, if anybody out there has like details, like DM me, appreciate. So Mike Hillstrom takes over and takes that team. I think they were 9-1, and they ended up losing to Pueblo Centennial in the playoffs, and that was a loaded team. Number 7, 1992, Darian Latimer shook up the world and had like 3,500 yards, broke all state records for rushing. I think it was that season, or did he do that in 93? I think he did it in 92, and I think the next season he had like 1,800 yards. I could have that backwards, but the 92 team was a little bit more successful. The 93 team had some issues that I think included injuries. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. Remember, I'm not trying to be an expert about any of this. I'm just studying it and trying to figure out what the hell happened. And this is the best I could do. And so if I screw any of this up, let me know. 84, that's the team that I was on. Greg Somerville, for crying out loud, Dave McAllister, Kirk Lister, Rob Mortensen, Jonavan DeSimone, Mike Berryhill. We were pretty loaded. We were like perfectly loaded, so we had some guys that would go two ways. And then, like, if we lost any of our starters, including the two-way guys, then we had some issues, kind of. But pretty good depth, though, and really good talent. Todd Carmichael, really good fullback and linebacker. Chris DiPaolo, same. Greg Busby, will hustle his balls off, which is another show that I won't even start to describe. 78 is the team with Brian Sherman, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong. That ended up going to the state playoffs. And then the 62 state champion team that beat La Junta in the first year of football at our academy because they won the state championship. So they're in the top 4. Then we get in the top 3. So that's where 87 jumps up to the top 3, in my opinion. They just had really good athletes and an amazing defense. I mean, in 84, we gave up a lot more than 6 yards a game. I mean, hang on. Do I have that? If I have that, no, I don't. But I think we gave up something like 9 or 10 points a game. Hang on a second. All right, let's see. Let's find out. Which defense was better? Clubs and activities. So, in 84, we gave up 15, 30, 45, 60, 65. So, yeah, it's not even close. 77, 83, 109 in 10 games. So we give up 10 points a game. And 87 team gave up less than 6 points a game. Now, we had a little bit better offense, maybe. We put up 50, 70, 110, 140, 155, 176. 190, almost 200 points. And they put up, what did they do? So almost 200 points. They put up 70, 87, 103, 110, 131, 150, 180. Oh, no, they put up more points. So there you go. So they put up like 220 during the regular season. And then we had a slightly better playoffs offensively because we put up another 30 points against Skyline. Anyway, so the 87 team ends up in third place. Then in second place, we got the 76, the original, the People's Choice. This is the team that lost to Wasson, supposedly not, on the goal line at Gary Berry Stadium in 76. And very easily could have won the league title and gone to the playoffs. But they finished second place. And in the first overall position, still, on my original list, the 80, I called them the 80-81 team because there was confusion about the graduation year. I'm calling each of these teams represents the year that you see. It represents the season, not the graduating class. And so at number one, the 1980 season, the team that lost to Thomas Jefferson in the state semis 14-12, they ended up being number one overall in the history of Air Academy football. So there you have it. The only thing I have to add to this is I had some fun with this. I absolutely for sure missed some names on my list that I'm going to show you. This is the all-time team. This is the best I could do in about a half an hour of going over. And so I'm hoping that this will spark a discussion of some kind where we can maybe come up with a better list now that we figured out the top 10. So at quarterback, I've got Steve Vogel. I think that would be the consensus number one all time. Kevin Sherman and Dave McAllister. Those are the three best quarterbacks that I remember. There was a kid that played in 2014 that had something like 58 touchdown passes. Something like that. It was insane. And that's when Mike Roof came back to coach 1 year and just like had a bomb squad. And they would lose games 61-58. And they ended up, I think they won 4 games that year or something. But they scored something like 600 points. It was insane, maybe 500. But that quarterback probably belongs on this list. I did not look up the names that were on that team. So then at running back, obviously, Darian Latimer. Darian Latimer, number one all time, 5,300 yards in his career, at least in his junior and senior seasons. Then I got Sam Beers, who's got, I think he's got 4,000 yards in his first 3 seasons. Had 1,800 yards in his freshman year. And so a lot of people were expecting him to be past Darian Latimer by the time he was a junior, only because he came out as a freshman like a phenom, like a man-child. And so he's a senior this year. And so we'll see. If he can get 1,800 yards, he will break. My understanding is he will break Latimer's Kadet record. I couldn't find anything on Max Preps for Darian Latimer his sophomore season. So I don't know if he's got more yards than the 5,300 yards that I think he has. Then I've got Greg Somerville. I'm biased, but Somerville for 3 seasons, he had way over 3,000 rushing yards. I think closer to 4,000 in his career. And so that's got to be up there. And then I've got Somebody mentioned Tony Davis. It was kind of quickly and matter of fact, and I don't remember Tony Davis. I'm not even 100% sure that he was always a running back, but I've got him in there because somebody mentioned that he would be a good candidate for the all-time team. Then on the offensive line, we've got Brian Bullard, who went to the Air Force Academy, Matt Slauson, who ended up in the National Football League, Dell Lockwood, University of Missouri, who was just a manimal, John Anderson, who I played with and was All-State, and I've got Dave Cubero, who was suggested. At wide receiver, I've got Archie, Rick Mediavilla, Terrence Thompson, Kirk Lister, Neil Brown, Lee Wagner, Pat Mazza, and Donnie Albrandt. I think there's a few more receivers that I'm missing. Those are just the names that I kind of know. And so we could probably have like 15 receivers on that list, including whoever the hell was hauling in balls in 2014. Because that season was insane. Tight end, the only two tight ends that I can remember that were like legitimate, that I remember being legitimate route runners and pass catchers, were Scott Hall and Clint Faust. I just don't remember the others. I'm sure there were others, so help me with that one. Defensive line, Jonovan DeSimone, who I think had the potential of being Division I. And I'm sure he has no regrets, but he could literally pick up me at 200 pounds and just throw me across the room, and couldn't bench 150 pounds more than like twice. He just had this ability to pick up a human being and just, no matter what the human being weighed, and move the human being wherever he wanted. But he wasn't in, he couldn't lift weights. It was bizarre. He just had this ability that didn't translate to steel, I guess. So we got Jonovan DeSimone, Tashe Williams, who he went to Georgia and then transferred to a smaller school, but he was a monster. Tom Rashavi, who ended up as, he was my replacement going into 86, and ended up, I think, was on the 87 team. Yeah, he had to be. No, he made All-State in 86 and then graduated in 87, in the spring of 87. So I think I'm wrong about that. But he played my position, and I used to give him shit that he better do good, otherwise I was going to come back and haunt him. And he ended up All-State with like 7 forced fumbles or something. He told me all about it. He passed away about 4 years ago. Rest in peace. An absolute fantastic human being. Really, really generous and exuberant and lived life to its fullest. Tom Rashavi, and a really good football player. Then I've got Lance Brown, who was suggested to me, and Jeff Hellewig from the late 70s, maybe going into 80. Linebacker, I've got Brandon Southward. I believe his brother was just as good. I think they were twins or a year apart, and so I've only got Brandon down because that's all I remember. I've got Dave Cubero again, so he's the only one going both ways. Based on his blocked kicks, he had like 17 blocked kicks in 2 weeks back in 1980, I think. And then Jeff Herring, who was a senior in 83, and Keith King, who ended up being Lyndon King in the National Football League. My understanding is he was a really good high school football player, but maybe not like a shoo-in for the National Football, or a likely NFL guy back then. But he makes the list anyway. D-back, right now I've only got Ken Harlan. That was the only one that was suggested to me. I I can't think of too many other D-backs that I know firsthand were good for this list. So I might need your help with that. If you can legitimately name some guys that made All-State or something back in the Barnett era or whatever, or the 87 team. I think there was some guys on the 87 team. Then the place kickers, I've got Chris Schultz and Steve Notley. Notley, we gave him a lot of shit. He was a different dude, but he could kick a football about 50 yards and it would go pretty straight. And he was a pretty good kicker. And he bailed us out of the Skyline game. So there it is. That's what I've got. It's not perfect. I might have to redo the all-time team. My voice is starting to go on me, so this might be a good place to just stop this video and upload it. Not quite 30 minutes, so thanks for watching, and leave me some comments, send me a DM, especially if you have any info on why did Kevin Sherman leave Air Academy after 2007. That I want to know. I've heard stories, and they might be completely false, and it might be none of my business, but you know how to get a hold of me. Thanks, guys. Have a good night.